Actually witnessed the bomb go off. We're on a hilly part of the course, so you could see right across the town, and you just saw a huge plume of smoke and dust. And initially I thought, because there was a petrol station in our line of sight, that something had gone on at the petrol station and it had exploded. But my dad, sort of very quickly, he was actually the surgeon on call at the Tyrone County Hospital in Omagh that day, and he immediately tried to phone the hospital to see what had happened, but all the phone lines had jammed, so we just couldn't get through. So he just said, look, I have to go. So he left. Pretty soon after that, I remember there were helicopters in the sky. And my dad's account was that he went up to the hospital, and he always parked his car at the front of the hospital, so when he went up it was just dead quiet, and it was like a normal day. But the accident emergency was at the back of the hospital, so when he got through the building to the back, then he came across, well, he described it just as a scene out of a war zone. And I think it was particularly difficult for him because there were literally people that he knew calling out to him, calling his name, so it was very hard. And then we didn't see him because he was the surgeon on call. There were only 2 surgeons in the hospital, and the other surgeon was on holiday for a couple of weeks, so he literally worked non-stop for about 2.5 days. And my mum actually had to go to the hospital and actually tell him to come home, because we were just worried he was just running on adrenaline, I guess. I thankfully, and none of my family were caught up in it, but I remember my dad coming home and sort of breaking down in tears, and that was the first time I ever, at the age of 14 or 15, had ever seen him, so emotional and cry, really, about something. Well, that was it, and I think there was a bit of a struggle, and it was really only when my mum came up and basically told him that he was going home, because yes, it must be, in that situation you don't want to stop. I knew people that were involved. One of my friend's parents was actually killed in the bomb, so I just remember there being endless funerals over the week. You just think it's not real because you're watching it on television. It just somehow doesn't seem real. I think even living in Omagh, I think Omagh, on the grand scheme of Northern Ireland, was actually quite a peaceful town. I really don't recall sectarianism being an issue locally. It probably was, obviously, but not when you compared it to other parts of Northern Ireland. So I think we were a bit sheltered, really. People seem to just get on with it. I think one thing maybe that what happened was, because so many people were affected, that it maybe was easier to normalise it, and there was definitely a lot of solidarity. I think in those kind of situations, people just somehow, you just have to find a way of going on. And in some ways, structurally, I think the town came out of it and was a better place in terms of the high street, and everything developed. And one thing I do remember is my barber who cut my hair, his shop was across exactly opposite where the bomb went off. And I remember seeing on the news, and when I saw that, I said, Leo's dead, he's dead. There's no way, because his shop was completely destroyed. But there was so much going on. And then a couple of weeks later, my mum actually bumped into him, and she sort of literally jumped on him and said, "Oh, Leo, we thought you were, seriously injured or possibly dead." And he said no, in whatever it was, 15 years, he hadn't had a Saturday off, but one of his daughters got married that day. So he was in Donegal. And that's the only reason that he survived, and his customers also. When you're at school, any opportunity to get out of school is, you'll grab it with both hands. Mm-hmm. So I suppose the initial thing was, there's this project, and you maybe didn't really know what it was all about. But I think the nice thing about it was it brought together people that wouldn't normally, because there still was a divide, even though there was peace. You know, there were people you didn't socialise with because they were part of a different community. They did different sports. They just moved in different circles. So I think it was a nice way of bringing together, you know, people, from both sides of the community. It's probably sort of a cliched thing, but I think it was a necessary part of whatever healing that you want to talk about goes on. And I think it was, I don't know who actually came up with the idea, but I thought it was a fantastic idea, because I'm definitely someone that doesn't like waste of things, and I just thought it was a fantastic way of both, using, because obviously flowers had come from all over the world, and it was a huge response, that wasn't forgotten, that it was put into something, and I think it performed lots of tasks. It was a project that help build community spirit, help with the healing process. It acknowledged, the support from all around the world, and it also sort of was a memorial as well to people who had died. So I think often when something like that happens, and in my professional experience, I've come across situations, very traumatic situations where, families, communities, devastating things have happened. And what I often find is I often find myself saying, or actually not saying anything, because I don't know what to say. As I've got older in my professional work, say someone kills themselves, or, something serious like that happens, which happens in my work, I literally do say, I'm sorry, there's nothing I can say, and people respond to that, and they recognise that sometimes there are no words. And I think, a project like that, because what I do remember is it was a very hands-on thing. You're putting your hands into things and mashing up. I think it was a bit of a production line, so I was on mashing duty, I think, at some point, or maybe it rotated. But I think when something like that happens, it sort of goes somewhere that's beyond language. It's at a deeper level, and you have to, I think, doing something like that that's hands-on is a better way of maybe beginning to. Eventually you might have to talk about it, but in those initial stages, having something very hands-on to do or interact with often helps people, I think, in those initial stages. And I suppose it sort of gives something to hold on to, some kind of structure. See someone would come to the door and it was a friendly face and, hands-on kind of thing. So I guess in some ways, it's a bit like the Petals of Hope in a way. Everyone was mucking in, and trying to undo or try and make something out of the mess, that had been created.